Hey everybody, so here we are with yet another camera mount configuration. Hopefully one of these will be good eventually someday. So we have our floats pretty much at equal stage of towards completion, and this is after roughly 3 applications of filler for each. I still have not put the gesso on this stuff. I haven't applied a coat of that yet, but that is next. That's going to be applied next, and then we'll sand these hollows out a little bit more, wrapping the dowel with sandpaper and just completing these channels, these cutouts here by sanding. Still using about 100 grit sandpaper to get into that. So that'll be after the gesso application, and then we'll see how that looks. And if it needs more filler after that, then there'll be another application of filler just here on each of the floats. And then some final sanding. We'll work up to about a 220 grit, and then I'll get a primer coat over everything. That's the surface primer. This stuff. This will be used overall. This goes over the fuselage, over the floats, the wings, the tail, everything. Everything gets that as a primer, and that'll be lightly sanded with probably a 220, just very lightly with a 220. No pressure, just no down force, just little side to side cleanup sanding with that. And then paint. I've decided I'm going to forgo the balsa struts that come with the Gillo float set. I'm not going to use any of this stuff. I'll just cut equal lengths out of the what do they call this? Streamline, aluminum streamline from Precision Metals. So it has an airfoil shape. Maybe you can see that there. I'm not sure if I have the right angle, but I'll use this for the crossbar struts. We've already marked where the cutouts will be on one of these. Let's see. Where did I mark you guys? Somewhere. Ah, here we are. So the cutouts go here and here. So this upper corner here and this upper corner there, and just under the deck of the float, right there and there. So we cut those out, and the problem a lot of people run into with those is they just cut them wide enough to hold the strut, and that creates a problem because you really have to deepen them. You have to make them a little deep in this direction down here, and that's so that the bar can rest. This is not a good way to show this, and this piece is too long, but if you don't cut them deep enough, you end up with a strut that comes out at an angle like so, and when you have both of them doing that, you end up with struts that they're not situated properly. So you really have to deepen the undercut here so that bar can actually rest at a downward angle, which becomes a flat line when the struts are arranged in parallel. And so often I see float planes where one float might be flat, but the other one is cocked at an angle, or they're both towed in. They're both cocked and at incorrect angle, and that's typically you draw the line right to this cut. It's too shallow. It's only big enough to fit the strut, and that's the problem. So we hollow that out nicely and deeply. We assemble the floats separately too. We're not gonna build them onto the airplane. So the first order of business will be to get them parallel and get the crossbar set up so that they're straight. They're not towed in or out this way. They're not cocked at an angle incorrectly. Nice and square and flat and straight with the struts installed. And then we come back and we make the plate. We'll use cardstock to simulate aluminum, the aluminum plate material that goes around and reinforces that joint. It's a little rectangle shape plate that has the cutout around the strut. Right, we make sure we use our filler first, and you know, we get the crossbars in there. We use a little bit of filler, make it nice, clean, and then we add those caps, those reinforcement plates around each one. We'll be adding we'll be carving an oar out of stock material, and we'll fashion a couple of the framework that holds the oar in place. Yeah. Float planes carry an oar. Sometimes it's in the back of the plane, but typically they're strapped to one of the floats, and that's so that pilot can guide the airplane away from the dock before he fires up the engine, or guide the airplane into the dock if for whatever reason you know, taxiing in is not an option. If there's people around the dock or boats, too much traffic, sometimes they'll just scull it in with the oar. So we'll strap an oar. We'll clean up the crossbar connections and put in the support brackets around the strut, simulated with the cardstock, and we'll get that a nice set of floats attached with the crossbars. And at that point, we'll begin looking at the aluminum stock I'm going to use for attaching the floats to the airplane, and that's going to be just this tube stock. This size is what, 1/8 inch, and that's going to be typical. I'll use this for the float struts and for the forward wing strut. The rear wing strut is a smaller diameter than the forward wing strut, the forward strut being a main and the rear strut just, you know, being applied for you know, for stability to keep the wing from twisting. Notice on all the reference photos on the Champ, the forward strut is the beefier strut, and then the rear strut is a little bit finer. So we'll be simulating that with 2 different diameters of the aluminum tubing from Precision Metals. And again, I use Precision Metals on a lot of these airplanes. It just looks, I mean, you can do it with balsa. You can make struts that look nice, and you can taper them and shape them and everything else. But I'm not, you know, a lot of times I just don't care to reinvent the wheel. And in other cases, while the balsa struts can be made to look pretty good, you know, nothing really matches the durability of the aluminum. It just holds up better, and you don't have to be concerned about it snapping for any reason. Not that, you know, things just are going to snap involuntarily in the night, but it's just the aluminum's just a better, quicker option in a lot of cases, and this will be one of those. All right, so again, you know, we're looking at, you know, our fuselage is very close to being ready to be prepped for paint. There's still a few little issues I need to clean up. Probably still want to do those strip stock chines that I talked about in another video. I'll be adding a chine here and another one here, and I'll be using filler to shape the areas around those. So there's still that step on the fuselage before we can really get into paint prep. But project's moving along. You know, we're getting somewhere. It's just going to be a little bit longer before we really have something that we can point to and say, well, that looks like an airplane at this point. And we're still a ways away from that. The other thing I'm going to be working on, you know, congruently with finishing up the floats and getting those ready, is I'm going to be making the tail surface. I'm going to be making the horizontal and vertical stabilizer and rudder, these 2 components here. I won't be laying those up. We'll just use these as a pattern, these two illustrations as a pattern, and do the same way we did with the biplane. We'll crossband our balsa sheet stock so that it can't warp, and we'll use that in lieu of framing and infilling on these. It's just you know, it just I don't know if it's easier necessarily. It's just I don't know, more fun. It eliminates a lot of the cutting and filling that goes on if you, and it's okay. I mean, this is a stronger, if you lay these up and do infill and then fill and sand and fill and sand, you do end up with something strong and unlikely to bend or warp. But it is time consuming, and the time that I want to spend on this model is going to have more to do with the paint and finishing than it is with these two components. And once you're finished, whether you did it by layup and infill, or in the other method, solid sheet balsa cross-banded, in the end the components will be indiscernible from each other. You wouldn't be able to tell whether I did one way or the other. And so that's another good reason just to do the solid material, make these out of solid sheet stock and finish them that way. So that's what I'll be doing with those, and that's probably, I'm going to be doing that probably tonight, making these. May even be fitting them onto the airplane. I'd like to get that done too, so that the connections can be made smooth and clean. Also on this airplane, with that vertical stabilizer and rudder, there will be a lot of filler. There's a look to this with the fabric tightening around the base of the vertical stabilizer, the fin, as if the fabric is being pulled from about a foot up on the base of this and being stretched tight and down over the fuselage. So I want to replicate that look with the filler, and of course the only way to do that is with it on the airplane, and of course it has to be done before paint and paint prep. So that means it's going to be sooner rather than later. We'll be applying those to the fuselage. So chines first, the strip stock and filler applied. These parts we made in the meantime, and then applied to the airplane once all that sanding is done with those. And then we'll be prepping for paint on the fuselage. So that's good. We're making good progress now. And and so on and so forth, right? Now we can kind of see, if we can, I don't know, I'm just playing around here now, mocking this up for some reason. And we have our floats. We'll get them situated side by each at the proper spacing, probably somewhere around there. And then elevation, we need to be behind the tips of the floats slightly, but not too far. And something like about this configuration here, something like that. That's what we'll have. Right? It should look nice. It should look like a little Alaskan bush plane when we're done. Those little puddle jumpers they use. Pretty commonplace up that way. So later.